Tuesday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope your afternoon is going well. Browns with a Players' Day off out in Berea, getting ready for the 12-1 Kansas City Chiefs to come to town Sunday for a 1 o'clock kickoff. Deshaun Watson injured, did post some video to his Instagram. He and his girlfriend enjoying a night out, a dinner. Out in Miami, where he's rehabbing. He's rehabbing in Miami as well as here in town. But Deshaun Watson, again, enjoying a dinner with his fiance. Let's welcome in Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Mary Kay, seems like there are a lot of people that are not happy that that Deshaun posted that. He is free to live his life, I guess would be what. I mean, it's not a great look, but he's rehabbing and living life.
Well, if everyone remembers, last year after he had the arm surgery, the shoulder surgery, he rehabbed out in Los Angeles. So this really isn't much different than that. The Browns did not require him to be in Cleveland for that at all. He was out there rehabbing with the medical team of his surgeon, Dr. Neil Elatrash. So this time around, he's got a home in Miami. He's got his trainer down there in Miami, and he's going back and forth between Cleveland and Miami. And I don't know why people would have a problem with that. I don't think we would ever have a problem with it if it was any other player doing the same thing. But I think because it's Deshaun, he's always going to get that extra scrutiny.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly with you. I know you were asked this in a Hey Mary Kay. Back in 2022, do you think the Browns would have been criticized if they had not gone all out, all in to acquire Deshaun Watson when they were noted to be one of the teams that was in the running?
I don't think they would have taken too much heat for that because everyone knew that he had issues at that time as well. So I think people would have been fine if they just had let it go. By the same token, I'm sure some people would have wondered why they weren't doing everything they possibly could to try to field a Super Bowl winning or potential Super Bowl winning team. So I think it could have gone either way. I really don't think people were necessarily clamoring for it, but at that time, I think there was, there were a lot of people that were excited that the Browns perhaps may have acquired an excellent elite quarterback.
All right. You wrote an article relative to Jameis Winston. Do you think he's kind of playing himself into coming back to the Browns?
I think he has definitely played himself into the conversation for coming back, not necessarily as the starting quarterback or as the surefire bridge quarterback for a year or whatever, but I think he's played himself into a situation where he could come back here, maybe help mentor a young guy, maybe start some games, maybe start half the season until a young guy is ready or something like that. So I think he could be in the mix. And I think these last 4 games will be telling. I think he needs to prove that he can play some good, clean football. So that's why I don't have a problem with them continuing to play Jameis Winston for these how many ever games they're going to still play him for. So yeah, they're still gathering data and information as they make their decisions for 2025.
When you look at that quarterback position in 2025, it's obvious that they need to figure out that position. What avenues do you expect them to go down and look into trying to find the guy?
Well, right now they have the number 5 overall pick if the season ended today. We'll see how that ends up. But they are not tanking. They're not putting young quarterbacks out there. They're trying to give themselves the best chance to win. So there's a chance that they could win another couple of games and maybe even move lower down the draft order. Right now they're at number 5. It's not a great draft class. So I'm guessing that they probably have other ideas in mind for ways to get a starting quarterback for next season through trades, free agency, whatever the case may be. Or maybe they will draft someone that they think can come in here and be their QB1 for 2025 with perhaps a little seasoning and a little bit of time. So we'll have to see how it goes, but they will scour other teams' rosters. They will look in the free agent market. They will look in the draft. Everywhere you can possibly look, they will leave no stone unturned.
You figure it will be kind of a competition, or will somebody come in as the clear-cut quarterback that they expect to take the reins?
It depends. It depends on who they can get their hands on. If there's a clear-cut starter out there and they have to give up some considerable assets, some considerable money to get this player, then he's going to come in here and he's going to be the starter. And they might just do that. They might go out and just try to find someone that they feel is an upgrade over anything that they have right now and either spend some draft capital or a lot of money on it. And in that case, it probably would be that person who would be starting for them in 2025. And then there are other grades along the spectrum of good quarterbacks where someone comes in and competes with Jameis Winston or competes with Deshaun Watson. But what they will do definitely is bring in at least one other starting caliber quarterback to either start or compete for the job.
So a guy that we know has been ruled out Sunday, but not much more than that, is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Have you heard any updates on JOK or not really anything other than what we're hearing?
Well, I've been writing, in each of my insiders, I try to give people a little update of what's going on with him. And basically, it's the situation where when you have a neck injury and you're dealing with probably some nerve damage or some spinal cord damage, it takes a while for those injuries to heal. And it's not an exact science. It's not like a bone. It's not like a ligament. It's in some cases, it's the nerve or some, I don't know if just the nerve or some bones or whatever the case may be. But he definitely is working through that right now. And nobody really knows exactly when or how he is going to come back. So I know it seems like a big mystery, but the Browns don't have an answer on that yet because they have to wait and see how the injury responds. If you remember back to when Greedy Williams, he had a neck sort of stinger injury and he just didn't have any strength in his arm. And he had to, for a long period of time, undergo periodic MRIs to see if the strength was back and to see if the nerve had regenerated. So I think it's something along those lines.
So again, this one from Hey Mary Kay. Are the Browns a good football team with a bad record?
I think the Browns still have a lot of talent. So I think they are we can't really say that they're a good football team with a bad record necessarily, but we can say they're a talented football team that I believe needs a really good quarterback to pull it out of this doldrums. So I don't think they're super far because they have plenty of talent. I can't call them a good football team right now because they're not winning, and you can't really be a good football team if you're not winning. But they're a talented football team in many areas, including the offensive line, including Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku. But they need a quarterback to pull the whole thing together. And if they can do that for next season, then I think they can hit the ground running and be ready to contend again for the playoffs.
Again, another Hey Mary Kay. I'm curious to your thoughts. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, are they safe? And do you think things could change over the final month of the season?
I do think that they're safe right now, but I don't really know what's going on in the mind of Jimmy Haslam. We haven't talked to him about that. We don't really know exactly what he's thinking or how patient he'll be with the current program and the current regime and how things have gone this year. I do have to wonder sometimes if the last 4 games will have some bearing on his decision. But right now, it seems to me that he wants to move forward and maintain the status quo. And that's just kind of the vibe that I'm getting. But I wouldn't be shocked with anything that happens after the season.
And, if you do change head coaches, general managers, you probably are going to change a larger part of the roster. So it kind of speaks to a bigger rebuild, correct?
Well, again, I don't know if they're in a massive rebuilding situation right now. I think they are about a quarterback and a couple other players away from being the football team that they want to be and being the contender that they want to be. So I just don't see a massive rebuild, even if they change things at the top of the organization. I still think, once again, you have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. You still have a good defensive line. You still have a good secondary. You've got some really nice skill positions. So I just don't think you're looking at a massive rebuild for this football team.
Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I. Going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Ted.
Hi, Betty.
Oh no, you wrapped yourself into a daze.
Holidays.
You need a break, so I got you Ohio Lotteries home for the holidays and Merry Money scratch-offs.
You could win up to $500,000 or $1 million. Oh, thanks, hon.
And they have games on the back. Has anybody seen my glasses?
We continue talking Browns with Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, I always enjoy your show, and I thought Sunday that Woods was a bright spot. I have been waiting to see more of him, and since Jameis has started, I felt a lot better about the wide receiver room in general. I think that's the value of keeping Jameis starting, is that we've seen what the Browns need and maybe don't need as much. They need help at running back, and like myself, the offensive line has gotten old and needs some improvement. And I feel better about the wide receiver line, but you can always use better players everywhere. Thanks.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Mary Kay, I think that's a valid point about the wide receivers. You look at what Jeudy's done. Even Elijah Moore has looked really productive with Jameis Winston.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons why I advocate Jameis Winston continuing on, because he's brought so much just from an on-the-field standpoint, but also from a leadership standpoint. And right now, the offensive line is enjoying blocking for him. He gets rid of the ball quickly. He's not taking a ton of sacks. And then he does get Jeudy involved. He gets Elijah Moore involved. So it's kind of woken up all of those guys. Again, he is leading the NFL with 329 yards passing over his 6 starts. What he has to do is cut down on those interceptions. If he had done that, they probably would have won a couple of more games in his 6-start tenure. And once again, not that it would have made much difference in terms of the playoffs, but just in terms of winning and boding well for the future. If he can cut down on those interceptions, he'll give himself a better chance to be playing more football.
What do you think about the offensive line? It just seems like it was a really big strength, and it's just not been a great year. I know everybody's been banged up. Is it a matter of, they're getting a little up there in age?
Well, I think that the offensive line has played a ton better now that everyone's back healthy. Jack Conklin is back. You've got Wyatt Teller is back. You've got Ethan Posich now being a lot healthier than he was in the early going. And they've kind of solidified left tackle a little bit, at least with a veteran in Jermaine Ifedi playing there. So I think the line is just a lot more stable than it was in the first 6-7 games of the season. And I think that's been really helpful for Jameis Winston.
Jedrick Wills, again, I know you wrote an article about this. Do you think he's played his last game for the Browns? They put him on IR, so he's not coming back the rest of the season.
I do think that he probably has played his last football for the Browns. Now, he is eligible to come back for the season finale, but I really don't think that they would do that at this point. I think he's probably done for the season and thus maybe done for his career here. And that's a shame because he was Andrew Berry's first-round pick. 2020 out of Alabama. I remember when I first talked to Nick Saban about him over the phone, Nick wasn't 100% certain that he was going to be able to easily make that transition from the right side where he blocked for lefty Tua over to the left side at that demanding left tackle spot. He didn't speak of him in just absolute slam dunk glowing terms, and it hasn't worked out the way anybody really expected it to, and that is in large part because of injuries. He has been injured the past couple of seasons. He's only started 12 games. And, it's just been a difficult road for Jed because of these injuries.
What do you think is the reason the Browns can't get their running game going?
Well, they haven't really committed to it very often. If you look at Ken Dorsey in Buffalo, part of the reason why he's no longer there is because he wasn't running the ball enough. And I'm sure offensive linemen on the Cleveland Browns would say the same thing about this year, that they wish that he were running the ball more here for so many different reasons. And I do think that it would take more pressure off of Jameis Winston. And I think they have what it takes to run the ball. When you have an offensive line like that, you can run the ball. Joel Bitonio noted the other day that, they're not in the flow of the run. So maybe it's going to take a little while to get it going. But now is the time of year where you want to be doing that. So I think that that they should rely on that a little bit more and take some of that heat off of Jameis Winston too.
Have you seen kind of Nick Chubb kind of putting things together and getting a little bit more like Nick Chubb the last few games?
Yeah, I thought this past game he did a really nice job. He averaged 4.4 yards per carry against a good run defense on the road. So I thought that was really, really good. He had his longest run of the season, 19 yards. So that was encouraging. And I think it's just going to be a work in progress for Nick. I think you'll see a better Nick Chubb next year than you've seen this year coming off of that major surgery.
Again, I know this is one of your Hey Mary Kays. Jerry Jeudy, can he be the quote-unquote #1 receiver everybody's looking for?
I think he can. I think he needs maybe one other, like 1A receiver to go along with him, someone else who is capable of making a Pro Bowl or getting 1,000 yards. And I know the Browns probably think that Cedric Tillman is that player, and perhaps he is, but I still think they need to add one more sort of blue chip premier receiver, and that will take a little bit of attention away from Jerry Jeudy, but I think he has what it takes to be a bona fide #1.
You heard coming off that he has some drops, and his hands have been he has made some catches that have been phenomenal, and you look at that and you go, that's why the Broncos took him so high in the first round.
Yes, absolutely. He has displayed wonderful hands, and his route running, we knew that was going to be good, and it is. It's really, really good. And that game in Denver for him was phenomenal. Of course, it was fueled a little bit by revenge, but that's okay. The Browns will take it. And hopefully for him, he can keep that going because he really is living up to the hype and living up to his first round status.
So again, I know this is from a Hey Mary Kay. Do you think the Browns should turn things over to Dorian Thompson-Robinson at quarterback?
Right now, I don't think so. I do think that, it might behoove them to give him a look in the third game, maybe the fourth game that's left, but not right now. I think with the Kansas City Chiefs coming to town, that's a good veteran defense with a great defensive coordinator. I don't think this is the time. I think the offense needs some of the success that it has had over these 6 starts with Jameis Winston to continue to feel good about itself, for the receivers to get nicely involved, and for everyone to feel that they have a chance to win the football game on both sides of the ball.
All right. So in the NFL, a team that wins the turnover battle wins the game more than 70% of the time. Over the last 2 years, Browns have the second worst turnover margin in all of the NFL. So this encompasses 30 games. 13 this year, 17 from last year, and the records. And these are the bottom 5. Atlanta is last at -21 through 30 games. They're 13 and 17. The Browns, who did so well a year ago when they were still -10, now -19 over the last 2 seasons. And you see all of the teams on there are, except the Falcons, are ones that are projected to pick high in the draft. Again, the turnovers, and Mary Kay, that's probably one of the reasons that we're so concerned about Jameis Winston's turnovers, the interceptions. You can't turn the ball over and win in the NFL.
No, you can't. And that's another reason why they can't just, with conviction, say, hey, we can turn this team over to Jameis Winston next year and have him be our starting quarterback. Because the way that it stands right now, that could be a dicey proposition. You definitely don't want to be throwing all of those interceptions. He's thrown 9 so far this season in his 6 starts. On 2 occasions, he's thrown 3. And then another time he has thrown 2. And they lost all of those 3 games. And who knows what may have happened had he not thrown all of those picks. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Can he play clean ball over the last 4 games? If he can, he will increase the likelihood of coming back.
Do you think a run game, he dropped it, I think it was 60 times against the Broncos, 40-some against the Steelers. Does a run game where you're not thrown as much, does that help a guy who's prone to throwing interceptions, do you think?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And he has thrown the ball 99 times in his last 2 games, 58 against Denver, and then 41 against the Steelers. And I definitely think that if they could run the ball more, that will take some heat off of Jameis Winston. I mean, and when you start to commit to it, you can really make some hay with it. And I think if Nick isn't going well, then you could throw Jerome Ford in there and see what he can do. But I do think that running the ball right now would help everybody involved.
Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Jim from Columbus, Ohio. My God, get rid of Andrew Berry and John DePodesta. These clowns have absolutely screwed Cleveland for years. Get a football mind in there like a John Dorsey. If they insist on keeping Berry because he's supposedly the smartest guy in the room, stick him in a little corner office and let him play with figures as far as the salary cap goes. But my God, get a football person in there. This is terrible. His draft picks are absolutely terrible.
Well, I would disagree. And when you pick and choose certain draft picks or certain drafts, you can make anything look like anything. This is John Dorsey's second draft in 2019 when he didn't have a high draft pick, kind of like Andrew Berry hasn't had a high draft pick. Now, they traded the draft picks to get Deshaun Watson, but it's a different story. Again, Greedy Williams was a decent player, was injured. Sione Takitaki, again, okay. Sheldrick Redwine never really hit it. Mac Wilson, he's playing well where he's playing in Arizona. But, Mary Kay, it's not like you can judge last year's draft or the year before's draft right now because they're people. They get better and they plateau. And a couple last year we would have said Dwan Jones, great pick. He was hurt. MJ Emerson hadn't had a great year. Greg Newsome hadn't had a great year. Could come back and be really good again next year. It's not like you can judge these things on 1 or 2 year increments.
No, you really can't. And you're also talking about some injuries, right? I mean, JOK, they got a nice bargain on JOK in the second round. He was a first round talent. He's a Pro Bowl caliber linebacker. And now he's out injured. So that didn't help matters. And then even when you look at Jedrick Wills' career here, as I mentioned before, was basically derailed because of injuries, including the MCL last year that for whatever reason, he never came back from it this year. I don't know exactly what happened with that. So some of these things are injury driven. And then in other cases, maybe the draft pick just didn't turn out to be what you hoped he would be, but that's pretty universal across the NFL. Some of them, the jury is still out on. They're still hoping for some really good things from Cedric Tillman. They hope that Martin Emerson Jr. can rebound. They hope that Dwan Jones nails down the left tackle position for the foreseeable future. So there are still things to come with these draft classes.
All right, this from Fansided, and I'm interested in your reaction to this. Every team's biggest need entering the 2025 season. Browns, they say offensive line. Obvious answers need to hit reset on quarterback, but let's not forget the offensive line needs a lot of help too. Jedrick Wills is set to hit free agency, appears to be gone. Line has simply not performed up to snuff. They need an overhaul in the trenches, so whichever young quarterback enters the fray in the offseason will have a fighting chance. Just your thoughts on the line. It seems a little harsh, but I think the line needs to play better.
Well, I think people are sort of reacting to the earlier part of the season when the two tackles were really kind of struggling, when they had James Hudson on the left side and they had Dwan kind of struggling to come back from his surgery a little bit on the right side. They didn't have Jack Conklin in there yet. Wyatt Teller was out for 4 games with his injury. You had Ethan Posick suffering from, I think it was a high ankle sprain. And there was just no continuity on the line whatsoever. All you had was really Joel out there trying to battle it out. And I think people are still judging the line based off those 5 or 6 games at the beginning of the season. I think the line is fine, and as long as Joel sticks around, I think they're in good shape for next year.
What have you thought about Jack Conklin in his return? He's been really good. We talked about it briefly, but I think they got to find a way to keep him around. When he has been healthy, he's been one of the best tackles in the league.
Yeah, and he still is under contract, so they will be good to go with him. And he's playing really well. And fortunately for them and for him, he's been able to stay healthy since he's been back, and that's good. And as we know, he held T.J. Watt sackless in 2 meetings. He had some help for sure, but he did a really nice job with that. And that was a feather in his cap, and I think he'll be even better next year.
So this is from the Bleach Report. Each team's move to make now ahead of Week 15. The Browns continue to play Jawan Briggs. The thing that really matters over the final few games for the Browns, finding players who are under contract might be able to take on larger roles. Briggs might be a good example. Cleveland is going to have some decisions with its older defensive tackles, and the rookie made most of the opportunity, 5 total tackles against the Steelers. You know, some of the young guys on the defensive line are intriguing. Isaiah McGuire would be another one. I like what you've seen from Briggs. We haven't really seen Michael Hall because he's been banged up as well.
Well, Mike Hall has been on injured reserve for the past 4 games with a knee injury, but he is eligible to come off of injured reserve this week against the Chiefs, and I think that fans should watch for that. I believe he probably will do so, and I think that, I think that will help them because they've been a little thin there in the interior now with Mo Hurst on injured reserve. Sam Kamara has had a concussion, and they haven't had their full complement there on the inside. So I do think that Mike Hall coming back will be really good for them. And then there's other young guys that I think that they need to see a little bit more of. I'd still like to see a little bit more of Jamari Thrash and see what he could do. Kadarius Toney, I don't need to see much more of that. I actually, I think I would be surprised if they stick with him for any length of time. Maybe they'll hang on to him for this week, but I just don't know if if he's going to be long for this team after the taunting call and the muffed punt. But there are young guys. Isaiah McGuire, you mentioned, has been doing a really nice job. And there are a lot of things that you can look forward to in the last 4 games.
All right. We're going to head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
What's up, Dave? It's Taylor. Hey, I wanted to get your opinion about Dustin Hopkins. Last year, he could have easily been the Browns MVP because we won between 3 to 6 games because of him and his kicking. He was awesome last year and was rewarded with the contract extension. But this year, man, we've lost maybe 3 or 4 games because of him. What do you think the Browns should do with him? Should we stick with him throughout the year? And where's Kay York when we need him?
Cade York is in Cincinnati filling in for Evan McPherson, who's hurt. Kickers are kind of like relief pitchers. Year to year, it just is different. Hopkins had a historically good last year. This is a historically bad year. Dustin Hopkins is somewhere in between those two.
Yeah, it's really, really unfortunate after the great season that he had last year, earning that big contract extension for him to be kind of going in the tank this year. But they don't seem overly worried about him. They believe that he is a good kicker in a slump, not one who has just fallen off the cliff. But you never really know. You never really know if a guy is going to just get it back the way that it used to be. So they're going to have to hope that he does. And there's no real reason to fret about it this season because they're not really going anywhere. And any game that they lose is an opportunity to move up in the draft standings a little bit. So I don't think they're overly worried about it right now. But they're going to have to bring in some competition in training camp because they have to make sure that he is being pressed and that they also have another option.
All right, so Chiefs come to town Sunday. What are you paying attention to? And really, what do you need to see the rest of the season from the Browns to think, all right, they're headed where they need to be?
Well, Greg Newsome is probably not going to play in this game now. So they're going to be down at least one starting cornerback there. And we also know that they are down some other defenders. But I do think that you want to look at Jameis Winston once again and see if he can play clean ball. I think you want to get the running game cranked up to the extent that you can. I think Myles Garrett has a chance to reach 100 sacks on his home soil on Sunday. I think that's something to watch out for. And if they can somehow get some turnovers in this game and finally win the turnover battle, they might have a chance. We know that Kansas City isn't the juggernaut that they have been in previous seasons. I think this game is actually winnable if the Browns don't turn the ball over.
Mary Kay Cabot, as always. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Mary Kay.
Thanks for having me.
Mary Kay Cabot. Make sure you check her out. Great Browns coverage, cleveland.com, as well as in the pages of the Plain Dealer. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Sports4CLE continues talking Browns. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Tony Grossi, a longtime Browns beat reporter, thinking through some of the things that could happen in the Browns offseason.
Realistically, you look at this thing, and 3-14 is not out of the question at this point. After getting through this, and how many coaches survived 3-14? Hugh Jackson did, and how'd that go? You know.
Wait, you're saying the door is open?
It's got to be. It's got to be. And it's unfortunate because it's not all on him, but who's it on then? Who is it on if it's not the head coach?
With that, let's welcome in Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Fred, it's on everybody. I mean, there is nobody that is blameless for what has been a disastrous season.
Yeah, I mean, they talk about they don't want to, when they're talking about individuals on the team, they never talk about any individual, and that's the same thing. We're all in this together, and they've talked about the collaborative, but that's one problem with nobody really becomes held accountable because it's never pinned on one individual unless it goes all the way to the top to the ownership, and so I think anything could be on the table depending. I do think these last 4 games do matter, but I really think that most of the accountability will be from the assistant coaches on down, coordinators maybe as high as offensive or special teams, but certainly assistant coaches, because that's usually where scapegoats end up if the head coach survives or the general manager survives. But I really think that they don't look at it as a wholesale start from scratch, go get a new coach, go get a new general manager and just start over, at least from the ownership at this point. I mean, Jimmy Haslam was at practice last Thursday before the Steelers game, walking around, talking with members of the media, seemed to be in a pretty good mood. He didn't seem to be kind of what you see. Not that we've been around a lot of owners, but those that I have been around, you never really saw them when a big move like a firing was going to take place. And again, I'll go back to, I feel like if they felt like they were going to make a change and they felt Mike Vrabel was the guy, you would have probably done it by now rather than get to the end of the season and have open season. And maybe Vrabel was never even considered, and maybe he's not interested or whatever, but I really don't think they're going to make any changes at that level. But yeah, 3-14 would be catastrophic. But, you don't have more $10 million plus players on a roster and talk about the Super Bowl and then get a 3-win season and nobody, blinks an eye and says, "Oh well, we'll be back next year, start over."
Well, when you look at it, the offense was they tried to remake the offense around Deshaun Watson, and that was kind of where everything started to unravel. The quarterback play has been awful, and I'm a guy that defended Watson. Hadn't worked. Don't need to see any more of it. Time to move on. And I think you kind of clean out the offensive side of the ball again. It's been bad.
Yeah, you got, now that you have a body of work, Joe Flacco at the end of 23, and then Watson, and then Winston, even though he's been inconsistent, he's averaged over 300 yards a game in the 6 games. So you've seen a body of work that you can even get recycled journeyman veteran quarterbacks and still have a pretty good offense. I really go back to that, those 7 games with Watson. They go 1-6. The season was over. The defense had been playing pretty good at the beginning of the year, good enough to win 2 or 3 more games, but the offense was so bad, didn't score over 18 points. It almost seems to have carried over to the rest of the team. The defense now lately, to me, they played a little better last week until the offense gave the game away. But against the Broncos, they didn't play well. They couldn't stop Denver every time, they were putting up points, but they kept giving it back to Denver. Even with the pick sixes, they gave up 27 points. So, I think it's affected them all. I think the recipe this year, you felt like you had maybe not the number 1 defense, but you thought you at least had a top 10 defense that could keep you in games, and then a good kicker, good special teams, so you could stay close. And if the offense could do anything, just be average, a little above average at the beginning, you could survive and then get better as the season went on. The offense started so bad, it buried them before they ever knew what hit them. I mean, when you're 1-6, I don't care, unless you're the Detroit Lions that one year, you just really can't get out from underneath it. And so that's the snowball effect. And what's the big question is, trotting out Watson, even when he was playing bad, after seeing what we've seen with Winston, I'm convinced they would have won 2, maybe 3 more games in that stretch if you would have, per se, brought him in like the relief pitcher. Things aren't going well. Let's try the relief pitcher. And all he had to do was lead him to a winning drive against the Raiders or the Giants or a couple other situations, and you win 2 or 3 other games. You can always go back to Watson if you want to, but try something else. But they just never changed, and it makes you wonder how long would it have went if Watson wouldn't have tore his Achilles. I mean, because we saw it several weeks before they kept trotting him out there. So they obviously thought he could play himself out of this slump, but I think now it's put to rest. So yeah, it's just unraveled, and I think it really is on the decision makers, whether it was Kevin Stefanski saying we're going with Watson as long as he's standing upright no matter what, because you let the season get out of hand. You could have made some moves earlier in the year.
Yeah, and the two teams you point out have 2 wins, the Ravens, or rather the Raiders and the Giants, and one of those 2 wins for each of them is against the Browns. What about the return of Jack Conklin? What have you seen from him, and what do you think moving forward, what he means to the line?
Yeah, I don't think they have a lot of choice. They're under contract for a couple years, and I would say he might be the best offensive lineman they have right now. And to see him come back from that injury has been remarkable. And all you have to do, in my opinion, he went against TJ Watt twice, and he didn't give up any sacks. I mean, that's a pretty good resume there. And I think that bodes well if you could get him through the season. The last 2 or 3 years, he's rehabbed the whole offseason. And, I think he's 30 years old. He's under contract for a couple years. They got to do some stuff with the offensive line. But if he can hold down the right tackle and DeJuan Jones can be the left tackle, I think that at least solves a little bit of your problem. Maybe you can concentrate at center or guard, one of those spots or whatever, and beef that back up, because I do think Conklin's been a pleasant surprise. I think that when he was hurt all the time earlier, you kind of forgot that he was an all-pro right tackle. And, we saw with Joe Thomas, some guys can go, even if you could get 2 more years out of him, that would help. You've got him under contract, so sure, you can restructure things, but I think you got other areas to deal with. So I think he's been playing pretty well, to be honest with you.
All right, Browns did make some roster moves, not on the field today, but they did make some roster moves. Greg Newsome is headed to IR with that hamstring, has to miss at least 4. The next 4, they waived Kadarius Toney. That's really not a surprise. Davis, Caden Davis, Jalen Gill, they signed Riley Patterson, who's kicked in some NFL games, and Julian Pearl to the practice squad, and Michael Dumfore, who they signed to the practice squad last week, was released. So of all of them, Newsome's interesting. Again, that's the same hamstring. He really hadn't played well either, and it'll be interesting to see what they do with Newsome in the offseason.
Well, this is a chance for Cameron Mitchell or even Miles Harden, the rookie who'd been on IR. This is the last week until he can, be activated, or he stays on IR the rest of the year. So I expect he'll get activated. And this will give them a good chance to take a look at Cameron Mitchell and Miles Harden to determine going forward, what they have. They also have Khalif Halassi. I still think he's with the team. They move those guys around a lot, but because you picked up the option for Newsome, so that means next year, he's coming back unless you can find somebody to trade him to, kind of like they did with Jedrick Wills, and you see how that worked out. I know that they feel like you never have enough cornerbacks. Newsome was a first-round pick. I think it's because he was a first-round pick, you expected more for him. But I've been disappointed in the play of Newsome and Emerson. For all their talk around the league that Emerson's on the break out of a Pro Bowl, I just see teams picking on him. Every time they throw it his way, he doesn't turn around. He gets either a pass interference penalty or gets beat. Kind of the same thing with Newsome. So I think that Mitchell and Harden here get a chance to see if they have anything with them, or you look at again to draft another cornerback. I know that Barry values cornerbacks. He can never have enough, and he's drafted one, I think, every year since he's been here. Just depends on how high, they feel the priority is. Denzel Ward, he's the only one you can really count on, but he's played all the games, but it doesn't seem like it because he's had to go out. He's had concussions and different things like that, but he's about the only guy I really think you can count on. I just think if you're going to play this type of defense, you got to have, another corner that can shut an opponent down. And I don't think as of yet, Emerson or Newsome have showed they can do that. They're good at cheerleading and, jumping around on a pass 10 yards over the receiver, but I don't see them necessarily locking down one side of the field.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Now I'm going to step aside to quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Ted.
Hi, Betty.
Oh no, you wrapped yourself into a daze.
Holidays.
You need a break, so I got you Ohio Lotteries Home for the Holidays and Merry Money Scratch-Offs.
You could win up to $500,000 or $1 million. Oh, thanks, hon.
And they have games on the back. Has anybody seen my glasses?
We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, guys, I was just thinking, if the Browns aren't high on any of the quarterbacks in this upcoming draft, I think there might be a solution, even though it's a little bit unorthodox. I think the Browns should take a flyer and sign Kyle Trask. I was high on him coming out of Florida, and he was sitting behind Tom Brady for 2 years, and then the Buccaneers bring in Baker Mayfield, and he'll be sitting behind him for 2 years. I think he has a lot of upside, and he was a second-round pick who we haven't seen much of. And I think it'd be worth it for the Browns to bring him in and see what he has, because we haven't seen much of him, and he was a second-round pick, and he really doesn't have many miles on him. So just my thoughts. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Fred, I don't know enough about Kyle Trask because I haven't seen him play. I think they need to bring in – if they don't go out and trade or sign a free agent of a guy who's played a lot, I think you bring in as many people as you can and let it sort it out who you think you can run an effective offense with. So, you know, I would prefer the guys you bring in have some starts under their belt in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote something about this last week. I mean, kind of a bird in the hand's worth two in the bush. I know everybody's kind of frustrated, you know, with Jameis Winston, the interceptions, but there's no question that he's similar to Joe Flacco, that he runs an offense that Kevin Stefanski can make things happen with. And, you know, there's a stretch when he was with the Saints, when he took over from Drew Brees after Brees retired, that he was 5-2 in the first 7 games. He threw 14 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. And we asked him last week, why was he so efficient then? Lack of turnover. And he said they had a really good running game. And I think that contributes to this. The Browns do not have a running game. Nick Chubb is not the Nick Chubb of 5.3 yards a carry. So they find themselves having to throw 40 or more times a game, and that doesn't bode well for a quarterback anyway. But especially if they're behind, Winston, we know, sometimes throws the ball instead of eating it or throwing it away. So I don't know. Unless you can find somebody you know is more effective than Winston, then I would at least keep him around. If you want to draft one, you better feel good about him. Right now, they're sitting 5th in the draft. If they lose out and they're in the top 5, I still don't know if there's a quarterback that will turn things around as a rookie. But usually, you got to get the first or second one. And the Giants and the Raiders are ahead of the Browns right now, and I pretty much am sure they're going to draft a quarterback. So, you know, even sitting at 5th spot, you might not get the top 1 or 2, you might get the third choice. And I don't believe in just taking a quarterback to take a quarterback unless you feel like they are the guy we want. And I think, how about this? If Kevin Stefanski's your guy and you signed him long term, let him pick who he wants to work with, whether it's Kirk Cousins, whether it's Jameis Winston, whether it's Kyle Trask. You know, he did well with Case Keenum in Minnesota. He did well with Cousins in Minnesota. He's had a tracker. He did well with Jacoby Brissett here. He did well with Mayfield, had one of his best years. So as far as Kyle Trask, I don't know why Tampa Bay didn't go with him and they decided to pay Baker Mayfield, but I'd have to think they know the situation a little better than you or I would. So I guess if the Browns really want to compete next year, they need to have somebody step in like Minnesota did with Sam Darnold. Did anybody see that coming? I think he's 10-2, and here's a recycled guy. So I don't know who that is. That's why Stefanski and Barry get paid millions of dollars to know what fits and what would be the best choice going forward. A high draft pick at quarterback, a veteran, an end-of-the-road guy. I don't know. But otherwise, you draft a guy as a developmental quarterback, I don't know if you're going to go anywhere soon.
All right, ESPN power rankings and each team's most shocking ranking this season. They go Lions 1, Chiefs 2, Eagles 3. They have the Browns at 24. Most shocking ranking. Second most explosive plays allowed. Last season, the Browns had the fewest yards per play at 4.6, but that figure's ballooned to 5.7 in 2024, mainly because of 100 explosive plays they've allowed. head-scratching issue for a defense that has given up the second fewest explosive plays last year and returned most of their starters. And you know, the offense has been so bad that we haven't paid attention to the issue with the defense giving up big plays all the time.
Yeah, well, that's where everybody pointed the pick sixes with Jameis Winston against Denver, but I blame the defense for that game. They let a rookie quarterback go for 3rd and 11 from his own 7, throw a 93-yard touchdown. They had another one where they had him backed up, could have had a safety, missed the play, and the Broncos went on to convert and get a field goal. That was a 10, 12-point swing right there. And it's kind of been, I think it really is a complimentary football thing when you hear about that. In those first 6, 7 games, other than the opener with the Cowboys, you know, the Browns didn't score. Well, even in that game, they didn't score. They didn't score 20 points, you know, with Watson, you know, at the wheel. And you're scoring 14, 16 points, and you were losing like 20-16, you know, in games like that. If the offense would have just done anything, they would have won a couple more games. So I think that wears on you on the defense. I also think the defense, you know, obviously misjudged, thinking just bringing everybody back, they'd pick up where they left off. They were exposed, you know, in that playoff game by the Texans, and it just seemed like they didn't take that serious. They felt like, oh, that was just a bad, they always said it was we picked a bad day to have a bad day. Well, I think there was more to it than that. Last year, they didn't play the top echelon quarterbacks more so than they are this year. And I think there's a lot of factors involved. And so I think they're going to have to take a real hard look, you know, at the defense. But everybody expected to have a top 10 defense, good special teams, a reliable kicker, and being able to, you know, if you could score 20, 25 points a game, you'd win a lot of games because your defense is going to hold the opponent around 20. And that didn't happen. And so here's where you're at. Sure, last year, you know, think of some games, you know, they shouldn't have beat Indianapolis 39-38 with, you know, PJ Walker, and you think of that 49ers game where the kicker missed the field goal. You know, 11-6 can't, but they might not have been as good overall as everybody thought. You know, you were really maybe a 9-8 team last year. And so they didn't make enough moves or relied on re-signing people that aren't having the type of years that they thought they would. So I think that's going to make it reevaluate all the way around. What do you really have to go with Denzel Ward, Myles Garrett, and uncertainty with JOK and some of the other guys you have, Delpit, and you got to get your defense. You know, you look at Pittsburgh, we're all scratching our head. How could they be 10-7 last year with Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett? They had a really good defense, but they did just enough to win on offense. They make a change at quarterback, bring in 2 guys who aren't really setting the world on fire, but they're making just enough plays and managing the game not to ruin the game. But the defense is keeping them right there. And if the offense just does a little bit, they win. And that's why one of the reasons they're 10-3 and the Browns are 3-10.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report, and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, you guys, it's about the quarterback situation now, who they going forward with. Like, I've seen enough of Jameis Winston. They just have him out there because of his personality and he's a likable guy. The reality of it, you have to see what we have in DTR. I'm not saying DTR can be a starter, but you have to see what you have as far as a quarterback room next year. They have to get DTR ready to play, have a game plan for him, and go from there. We don't know what he can be until you get him prepared and get him in there for another start. Give him a full week of preparation and another start and see how you do. And that's all I got to say. You guys have a good one. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Fred, I don't, again, I'm not opposed to letting DTR start a game or two. If you're expecting him to be a starter, I think they know he is not a regular starter in the NFL at this point. We've seen enough. The accuracy isn't there. He doesn't take care. He's going to get killed the way he runs with the ball and doesn't slide and doesn't get out of bounds. I think they can evaluate what they have in DTR, but if they want to start him for a game or two, that's fine.
Well, yeah, if anybody that subscribes to the OBR would see some of our insiders said the plan is to kind of get him ready, give him some reps with the first team. I don't think it's the wisest to throw him out there against the back-to-back defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, who are 12-1. Got a great defense, but I could see him next week, starting him down with the Bengals. The other school of thought is split up some time. How much time do you need? If you're really looking at him, I hear this about to see what they have in him. I think they know what they have in him. You kind of described. He's undersized. He's slight. He's got potential. Right now, he's more of a running type quarterback, but I don't know if that bodes well long-term in the NFL for him. There's a reason he was picked in the 5th round. No disrespect, but you can't expect to get a guy in the 5th round to be your franchise quarterback. I've been doing this for a long time, and most of the guys that end up coming from there, the teams got lucky with it. If they thought they were franchise quarterback, they would have taken him, 1st round, 1st pick in the draft. And so that's why I just feel like, yeah, I think he's the answer long-term as a backup. And I think you've seen enough to know that he can be the backup quarterback. But you never really expect your backup to be the guy that needs to get ready to play. That's what you do in practice. And I think he's going to get a lot of practice rep, but I don't know. I'm kind of the opinion to see, can Winston maybe shake it off and cut the interceptions down in the last 4 games so you feel good enough? Because if you could eliminate that aspect of his game, I think you would feel pretty good, because he does throw a nice ball. He does everything Joe Flacco was doing last year, and everybody wanted to bring him back. Flacco got away with some interceptions until the playoffs, but that's kind of what happens with the gunslinger. So I just think, let's see another game this week against a good team with Winston. And if he does, the same thing, you still got time to do the DTR thing. I don't think you need to, throw him out there for 4 games. I think 2 or 3 is the most you need. Like I said, I've seen him. I think I've seen enough. I think they know what they have in him. I don't know, what the mystery is.
All right, so this is from Dog Pound Daily. 3 Browns players and 2 coaches to blame for Cleveland missing the playoffs this year. Number 1 on their list, quarterback Deshaun Watson. Week 1 through 7 was a nightmare watch for Browns fans. Watson never fully got comfortable under center, posted some of the worst numbers for a starting quarterback ever seen, never threw for over 196 yards in a game this season. Number 2, Kevin Stefanski. He's shown he can work with any quarterback not named Watson, but that's the issue. He might have be handed Watson again if he's healthy and good enough to start in 2025. Will he be able to use that as an excuse if Cleveland struggles again, not to score enough yards on offense? Most likely not. Number 3, Dustin Hopkins made 64% of his field goals, worst in his NFL career. 4, Deuce Staley. Some of the flatness from the running back room has to do with the offensive line, but we saw very little improvement in the play calling for these runners this season. Staley, well-respected coach, likely going to see better days with a revamped offensive line, but it was a bad year for him. Jedrick Wills Jr., team's offensive line, first pick in the 2020 draft. has yet to make a name for himself. Andy is on the IR, probably headed to free agency. Again, Freddie, everybody's to blame. Watson, the quarterback play was god-awful. And my question is, how did you not play him in preseason? It didn't look like they were ready to start the season. That falls on Kevin Stefanski, who I think should be brought back. But I understand the questions that are being asked across the board here. You have to look at everything when a season is this big of a failure and disappointment. You got to look at everything. How you're getting guys ready. What's going on in training camp. You should be asking those questions of literally everything you did. That's how bad this year was.
Yeah, I think internally they are. The thing, that we get anything, and I understand that, but those questions are asked all season, like about from the media, in defense, about why are you playing Watson? Why don't you, and it's just like, we're just trying to do the best we can, and we give us the best chance to win. And what do we got to do? Well, everybody watching, you, the listeners, the audience out here, they all know you can pretty much see what's going on, but you don't see any changes. And that's, what's a little frustrating. You talk about the kicker, a bunch of questions about Dustin Hopkins. He's our kicker, not bringing anybody else. What'd they do today? They brought in Riley Patterson, who was the kicker last year at the end of the season after Hopkins got hurt. Did a pretty good job. And, it's things that are obvious that they never really answer those things, so you just are left to speculate. But yeah, I mean, if you and I can see what's wrong, they have to be able to see what's wrong. They have to be able to see that Watson was the problem instead of saying, well, it takes all 11 and so forth. The offensive line didn't just magically get better the day he got hurt and right on down the line. There's all the way around. I think the personnel, they over-evaluated, unless you want to look at last year, that the players all, overachieved and played better than maybe they were. I think it's somewhere in between. They might not have been 11-6 team last year, but I don't think they're a 3-10 team this year. They might be more 8-9, 9-8, 7-10 type of situation. So the NFL is so fine, and it's when you play them in the schedule. If you're playing the Giants and the Raiders might have played their best at the time the Browns played them. You play them any other time and you win those games easily. And the Saints were terrible at the beginning, and they got hot right when they fired their coach. And, and you look at the Broncos, they were terrible at the beginning of the year, and then their rookie found his footing. Jaden Daniels, was playing really well in his fourth game. Nobody expected that. So it's, there's a lot of factors, and what they have to sort out, is it individuals? Is it the offensive line coach, the drop from Bill Callahan, or is it the players, or both? And, all the way around it. And that's what I said. They get paid to evaluate. And if you're going to keep Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, then it's kind of up to them to evaluate that. And they made the decisions, on the guys that came in. So all things being said, it's a big uncertainty going this offseason for sure. But the number one question that they have to resolve is who's going to be the quarterback. Because as soon as the season's over or before, you have to have that established, or, everything is built around, you got to say Watson is under contract, but we're not bringing him back as the starter because nobody else is going to want to come here, including Jameis Winston or anybody, if you're going back that route. And so all the way around, it makes, unless you're just going all in, you're probably going to draft one. You don't even know where you're drafting yet. And so that's why I think these 4 games make a big difference. You could finish with the first pick. You could finish with the 10th pick. Who knows?
And the insight. Thanks very much, Fred.
All right, Dave. Thank you.
Fred Greetham, make sure you check him out. Always really good stuff. He is the senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.